So first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Everybody had a chance to take a look at those? Any comments or questions? If not, if somebody'd like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Good. Everybody in support, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Cool, thank you. This is, as you probably have gathered, this is a packed agenda. And I sort of enter into this thinking I'm going to try to, I was going to say, push you through this, but I'm going to try to guide you through this in a way that we can get through as much as we can. If we're, if they're not making it through, then I will be asking if there's any interest in meeting in a special meeting before next month's meeting, because as you may have seen in the packet, some of these are time-sensitive kinds of issues. So I'll just say that I hope we can get through a lot of this, but I've also set up the agenda with the hope that we can be out of here by 7 as well. So trying to keep that in mind. So the old business on the agenda is the work list that we've put together. And forgive me if this takes a little extra time getting through this, because we've had problems with the computer and accessing things. Get through the minutes. Okay, this might look a little bit different to you. It's been somewhat reformatted, some things have been moved around, but what I've done is put together the work list. Really the key is, as you get into this, looking at the different types of work that are reviewable, and then whether it's an A review, which is the full commission, a B review, which is an administrative review, and there is something showing in a few instances there's a B with a little C, which means there's not a certificate of appropriateness required, but we encourage some consultation with staff before they move ahead with something. And then the big C is it's not required, review is not required, and somebody can do what they want with that particular item. And what I've done on this, where you see a red symbol like this, or red color on these, that's really where there were some questions. As I got feedback from each of you, there was at least one person that had a question about that particular issue. So we can stop as we go through. I'd like to just take this and move through this, and stop me when you've got a question or an issue about the sorts of review. My bias tends to be on less, both for the applicant's perspective as well as your time, trying to respect your time, is the more that can be administrative review, I think the better. Having said that, I know there are a lot of issues that you need to get your teeth into, and that's, so that, I'm not trying to shortchange you on any of that. And I should say, one of the key issues that I'll get into later a couple of different times, one of the key issues is, do we have adequate design guidelines to address that particular type of work? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes I'm not clear on what we have, because we've got the guidelines that you can find on our webpage, and we've got several other versions of that, and a variety of other guidelines that are floating around. So some work on guidelines, I'm assuming, is a companion piece to this whole effort. So as we go through this, I'll just jump into the work area here. And if anybody has any questions, just jump in. Well, let me back up to one section. Talked a little bit about it before. There's a concept in here about cultural landscapes, and that really is, to be able to put something in here, that would take a text amendment in the ordinance. Taking anything back to the city council as an ordinance amendment to this, I think could be triggering a broader conversation than we necessarily want to have. But for the purposes of understanding reviewable work, I've still got it in here. And the notion is what I'm calling cultural landscapes are those public open spaces that exist within the existing districts. It would also apply to Van Raalte Farm, but that's covered under the way that property was designated in the ordinance, so that isn't a particular issue. But Centennial Park or even Washington School Park or Washington School Green, and I thought there was one or two others, those kinds of spaces.
The boulevard.
Yeah, I think you could say the boulevard. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah. Where it makes sense to me that there's some historic review over what happens in those public open spaces. It doesn't take it to landscapes on private property. And that kind of opens another door that we've kept away from in the past, but it's fair discussion if you want to have that. So this still is holding this cultural landscape concept in this. And until I hear differently from you all, it still says there may be instances where something is not visible from the public right-of-way that maybe could have a lesser review. And when I say not visible, I'm saying there are buildings blocking views, there are grade changes, the sight lines aren't likely to change over time. If there's a tree planted there and it's blocking a view, I see that as a temporary thing, and that tree could disappear, or that bush could disappear, and then it's visible. So there's this concept that's kind of woven in occasionally, shows up as maybe it's in the back of the house, you can't see it anywhere from public view, maybe you can see it from the neighbor's second floor or something like that, but you can't see it from a street view. Also, presumption that if staff is reviewing something administratively and there's an issue, the applicant isn't happy, we're not happy, we're not reaching the right resolution, or it's just a difficult decision to make, we can always bump it up to the commission for your review. And then ordinary maintenance is not considered work under the ordinance. So there are definitions of all of that we can then get into. But if someone is repairing, you know all this, if somebody's repairing wood siding, they are allowed to go ahead and repair the wood siding. The challenge comes in, when is it just a repair versus the conversation we had about vinyl siding last week, when somebody just decides they want to take all the vinyl off the building and put a new vinyl on. They're not addressing a repair issue. They're really coming at it from a different perspective. So what is reviewable in that sort of circumstance? So those are things that are kind of show up throughout all of this. The general scope of proposed work requiring review involving multiple features, including at least one historic district committee item, is a full commission review. Routine repairs, not reviewable. Routine repairs where there's a change to a new piece or new material, that is at least reviewable administratively. Depending on the magnitude of that, we could bump it up to the full commission. Extensions of certificates of appropriateness. It's a 1-year certificate. If we don't catch it or the applicant doesn't catch it, sometimes they go past the 1-year deadline. What this is saying, where it has gone beyond a 1-year deadline, that it would be an administrative review to extend that. And the caveat to that would be if there has been a change in the ordinance here following a first extent, well, this is separate. If there's been a change in the ordinance sometime during that 1-year period, the fact that they've gone past the deadline technically then sends it back to the Historic District Commission. There aren't many changes that happen very frequently in the historic district, but there is the possibility that could come back to you, but otherwise the intent is it would be an administrative approval to move forward with that. Following a first extension, a second extension may be granted, again, provided the codes and regulations requirements have not changed substantially, and again, that would be an administrative review as proposed. And here is where a certificate was approved over 12 months ago and an approval was not extended. The proposed work must go through the C of A process all over, A or B as first approved. That means if it was approved by the commission initially, it should come back to the commission. If it was approved by staff initially, it should come back to staff. Let me move down. Okay, here's where we get into specific features. And again, these, thanks to comments from some of you, the categories have been reorganized a little bit, grouped a little differently. We moved some things around. But architectural detail and ornamentation, repair or rehab without alteration of size, appearance, or material doesn't get reviewed. Removal or alteration of appearance or material where it's minor, and that's a definitional sort of thing. It would be administrative, and where it's a major change, it would be the full commission. And that I have not yet tried to define the difference between minor and major. But if you're comfortable with the notion that there is minor and major, we can take a look at that. Keep moving.
So as we go through these, unless someone has comments, we're gonna assume we're okay, the group is okay, unless
That
somebody
would be
says,
my
whoa,
assumption.
stop. Okay, I just wanna make
Yeah.
sure I understood.
And there's no pride in authorship or
Yeah,
anything on
yeah,
this, so
yeah,
if you've
no.
got concerns, stop me.
Yep,
So, awnings and canopies, installation of new awnings and canopies, the commission, removal of existing awnings and canopies, the fabric and or a frame would be administrative, an in-kind replacement of fabric on an existing fabric or metal frame wouldn't be reviewable.
Can I just ask, as an owner of awnings, I put mine up, didn't realize they
Thinking about
were,
that.
reviewable. What's the general criteria for, like, I guess they're temporary fabric awnings in the sense that you take them up and put them down. How do people weigh in, or how have you guys seen these in the past? As far as saying to somebody, no, you can't do awnings, or,
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I don't know that I've ever actually seen an awning come through.
Okay.
It's been
It's not like it used to be where you put those canvas awnings up every year. You just don't seem to do that like we used to.
I do,
Well,
I mean, that's, I was just
The
asking.
old fuddy-duddies in the
Yeah,
neighborhood.
right, well,
Yeah.
when we took down a couple of trees, then all of a sudden it's like,
Oh,
oh
for sure.
yeah, on the west side of the house,
Yeah, sure.
awnings are good.
Yeah,
So
We
anyway.
just saw Tim Stahl's house on.
Well, yeah, and he
12th
took
Street.
that one down, and I told him, you might wanna consider that when
Yeah.
the sun comes in on your
Well,
kitchen from the west.
I think you could make an argument that there's minimal damage to the house.
Yeah.
It's removable.
Right,
Yeah,
And
that would be the
maybe we
only-
shouldn't review them at all.
issue that the commission would have is the damage to the property, which it really,
yeah.
it's not very significant with an awning, so.
I know somebody I knew wanted to put one up, like a wooden, which is a more substantial thing, Larry Helder was gonna do one on the west side of his house, but he wanted to do a wooden one, and I don't know if those are different. I think you have them sort of together, right, whether it's a
Yeah.
wooden, thing that's then added onto the house versus a temporary, I mean, you
I
can
see
still
that
take
as
it
more
off.
of a structural
Yeah,
addition
yeah.
to the house than I do as
Okay.
as what I've intended, at
Yeah.
least in this.
Okay,
But I'm comfortable either way. If you say you don't wanna see these things, that's okay too.
I think the way we have it is good. Where we would review new items, but if it's already existing, I don't think we really need to deal with it.
Okay. And the removal unless it's a significant feature, and I can't think of any offhand.
There's a house on Pine Avenue that has some, it's kind of that copper color thing, and that has some pretty substantial things that have been, I don't know when they were added, or if just when they got painted, I suddenly noticed them, but they're more of a feature than I would think most awnings are, but that's the only one I can think of that has that. No, I think the way you have it is,
Okay.
and you can always decide on your own that, well, I really need more input on this, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even if we've given you the go-ahead, you can say, well, yeah, this is squirrely, I need more advice. Okay.
Or the removal of one, I could say, it's insignificant, it's an
Mhm.
insignificant
Yeah,
awning.
sure.
Fine, have a nice day. And it's a simple,
Yeah.
half a page certificate
Mhm.
saying, go to it. Address numbers and mailboxes, it's a property maintenance code issue, but it's not anything that I am suggesting we worry about.
I do wish people would put them on their houses, but
That would help.
I don't know how they get a fire truck or a pizza without one.
We're current offenders of that.
Or what?
We don't have ours up right now,
Uh,
because we read it our stairs.
Sure.
You know, terrible.
So
Balconies,
Sharpies are for.
Sorry.
throwing balconies to the commission.
That'll look good.
Construction or alteration or removal of a balcony.
mhm.
Barrier-free wheelchair access ramps. Pierre, I think you had a comment maybe about this one. But what I've said is when it's located in the front or side of a house and visible, it should be the commission review, and if it's behind the house and not visible from the public way, that's where I've said an administrative review would
Yeah,
be
how does that
sufficient.
fall in with the law though? Because like
Mhm.
across the street from me, or John's neighbor
Mhm.
has a wheelchair ramp right up the front of the house.
Yeah,
And, he was saying that it's the Disabilities Act allows him to do whatever. And then when we look at, like, for instance, I don't think it was in the historic district, but when we were talking about the Black River School, that was a completely different situation where I thought that they were making like accessibility for people, and they just weren't happy with that accessibility.
yeah.
So that was my questions on
Okay.
that. How does it fall into play with the Disabilities Act?
Yeah, and I can only tell you, it's been a long time since I've wrestled with that issue. The way it was approached when I dealt with it, it was ultimately, they will get a ramp.
Mhm.
The question is how it's done and where it's done. And depending on a community's bias, you may think they should be able to come in the front door like everybody else does, and I get that. So if that's the case, then you have to figure out how best to make that ramp so it's not too intrusive, and how you attach it to the property becomes maybe one of the detailed
Right.
issues of that.
And can you take it away?
Yeah, without damaging, yeah.
In most cases, I assume it's done because somebody living there needs it, not because they just want anybody who's
Not for the
handicapped to
public.
be able to come in their front door.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you one you're probably gonna see in the very near future is Earl Lehman's, half of that duplex,
Okay.
Mhm.
where his son will be moving
Yeah,
into where
yeah.
Earl was. And he's gonna need accessing into that
Yeah,
wheelchair
that's a
access.
high, if I'm picturing it right, I mean, it's like 4 or 5 steps, isn't it?
Yeah.
Front and back.
I haven't had a conversation yet with them, so I don't
Mhm.
know what their intent is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you'll see that soon.
Okay.
So I guess the question then is, are you comfortable with the distinction of A and B on these two?
Yeah.
I think I am, but it's always possible that the owner will not be, that they may have a reason we haven't thought of to want it to be on the front.
Yeah, layout, house layout wise, and if, that they're in need of a ramp, maybe their layout just lends better to them coming in the front, the back entrance is tight for other reasons and things like that, so it's very case by case.
Yeah.
But then that would come to the commission if
Yeah.
they said, we want it to come right
This is
off.
why
the-
we-
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, chimneys. Alteration, removal of the chimney cap, installation of metal or PVC chimneys, repair, replacement of chimneys and chimney caps, installation of chimney liner not visible on exterior, and removal of chimneys. You've seen a bunch of chimneys lately.
Mhm.
And typically, it's the same contractor who likes pulling them out of
Yeah.
houses. That's all good.
Who was that?
I know, so,
Jeff Burke.
Jeff Burke.
Burke Removal Act.
Oh,
So,
well, okay, yeah.
so
I just caught up.
I've appreciated the conversation around that the
Mhm.
commission had. So I've left that as an A, that the commission will review those. A couple of these, one is not visible really. The installation of chimney liner typically is not visible. It depends on what they do with the cap, but the liner itself is not visible. And replacement in kind, I've said both of those are not, continue to be not reviewable. But any change, significant change or alteration should come to you.
Is there anyone that you people might know of that you would recommend to do repairs on a chimney? I have to take the ivy off of mine, and there's really beautiful brickwork hidden underneath it, and I want to have it repaired, appropriately.
Yeah, I can get you the name of a couple of contractors. It's interesting because the next item on this list is the cleaning of exterior surfaces, and frequently it's a brick surface that becomes the challenge, and so there's a need for some guidelines. We've got a little bit of that in the guidelines, but they could be beefed up a little bit. But cleaning of exterior wood and metal materials is we've said go ahead and do it. But in exterior masonry, we've said at least it should be a staff administrative review, and just a caution about how harsh a cleaner they decide to use on a brick. But I can get you a couple of names of contractors who do a better job than the guy did on Central Avenue. I guess it was 14th Street, I guess, that had the brick repair that was not done well.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Hey, Kim.
Hi. Out of breath, sorry. Running up the stairs. Budget meeting been over.
So, decks and patios,
Thank you.
and we're just running through the list, and if you've got any
Okay.
comments, jump right in.
Sorry, everyone. This is
Um,
first week back. At work was a little off the rocker.
You did all the ones that you had objections to already, so.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
thank
right.
goodness.
You don't have any objection
Yeah.
anymore, as it turns out.
Thanks,
So decks and patios not attached to the house, at grade level or under 18 inches in height. We've said if it's in the front, it's reviewable by the commission. If it's in the rear, it would not be. This could be if it's visible from the street.
It's on the corner lot.
Yeah, yeah. Just thinking out loud as we go, so please do the same.
Is the rear supposed to be a B or just not reviewable at all? If somebody builds a deck in their back, we don't care?
So it
If
says-
it's at grade level or
Okay,
or
yeah.
that low,
Okay,
I'm
so.
saying we don't
that-
care.
Yeah, okay.
Not attached to the house and above 18 inches, then there's in the front, again, we review it, commission reviews it. If it's in the rear, then you're getting to a height that the building code triggers some of their review, and we should review it as well. And if it's attached to the house, either new or an addition to it, then we're saying it's commission review.
Just out of curiosity, if you know, Phil, is 18 inches the point at which railings are required? or-
No, it's actually higher.
I was thinking
That would
30.
be higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, let's say,
36.
30 inches maybe? 30, 36?
Yeah, it's only
somewhere in there.
Okay.
That's not
I'm looking at you because I
standard,
think
yeah.
it's somewhere between 2 and 3 feet.
Yeah, I don't know. Have to look it up.
Okay, replacement in kind, we're still on the decks and patios. So replacement in kind, materials, dimension, and design, no review. Replacement or rehab with different materials and/or design minutes, commission review. Demolitions. Building with floor area greater than 200 square feet, which is a 10 by 20 building, one-car garage perhaps. We've said it's commission review, and building of 200 square feet or less, it'd be administrative review, and exterior portions of a principal building, if they're to be demolished, then that would be a commission review.
So the 200 square feet or less, or are greater than, okay, sorry, I was reading it in reverse. So if it's like an outbuilding, like a shed, that's one thing. If it's a garage for 1 or 2 vehicles, then we review.
Well, you know, 10 by 20, we're right on the edge of
Yeah.
whether it's required or not,
I-
right
Really
there.
small footprint for parking.
Yeah, it is.
That's why I didn't flag to me. It seemed like it was pretty darn small to be a garage, but
I mean, we could change it to 180 square feet and really,
make it really
And make it
safely
very
below the
finite.
threshold.
I would do that, to make sure that you see anything that is like garage type.
Because the garages are super endangered.
Yep, completely.
And a lot of them are super tiny,
Yep.
so.
Yeah.
Because they were carriage houses
Uh-huh.
rather than,
you know,
Yep.
which is my pause there on that one.
Mhm.
So doors, we do have some guidelines that probably we need to review. But replacement of exterior doors, I've said administrative. Installation of new or replacement of an existing storm door, I've said administrative. Construction of a new door opening, where they're cutting into the house or enlarging a window to make a door, changing the size, I'm saying that comes to the commission. Replacement of overhead garage door with the door differing in style and appearance. I've said administrative, we do have some guidelines on garage doors, although I also have a sticky back note from Grace saying this needs work on those, but there are some guidelines there.
Seems like the last two are reversed. Like we would want to review the one with differing style and appearance, but we wouldn't care about one with the same. Is that?
I
Yeah,
think you're
I see
right.
what you mean, yeah.
So replacement of exterior doors, how many times do we have an exterior door where they don't need to possibly adjust the size of the opening?
Yeah.
We've had a couple of new front doors in the last
Yeah.
couple
Right.
of months. Without changing the opening.
My question is, my pause there is really more about the people who want to just replace the door, and we've given guidance on whether it was historically appropriate, more so than just replacing the door.
Right. I think we end up doing that probably 9 times out of 10.
That's what I'm
Is
thinking.
giving a little bit of guidance, because I don't know how good our,
Oftentimes, people don't really care. I mean, that's not true.
yeah.
They have a door in mind. They're like, oh, I like this door. I need to replace my front door because it's rotten at the bottom or whatever. And then we end up, but then most people usually end up saying, well, maybe you can guide me, because they
Mhm.
don't have that on what the right style door is for this home.
That's, yeah.
I agree with that, but I wonder if Phil could do that. I mean,
I'd say that's where we've got to make sure the guidelines are what you want to see.
Exactly.
yeah.
Some of these are kind of iffy on that border in between A and B, and it's like we really need to nail down the guidelines probably before we would completely implement this.
Right,
Mhm.
because to your point before, Phil, you've mentioned oftentimes, think about it as if I wasn't here. Because it's one thing to trust your judgment or trust Grace's before you, but if it's somebody else who's here after you, without guidelines, how are they making informed decisions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's fair.
So I honestly think a lot of our job too is just providing a bit of guidance to the homeowner, because a lot of times they really don't know, so, and we're happy to help.
Yeah.
Is this the best way to help, though? I mean, to say, you should wait and come to a meeting that's coming up in 3.5 weeks or something, and
Well,
and talk to 7 or 8 people about the style of your door? Or is that something that, but I agree, and I had the same feeling when I went through it myself.
Right.
I wish they would help me a little bit with
Right,
choosing
right.
this door, because I don't
Yeah.
really care which one.
Right.
So I could see pulling out the design guidelines, sitting down with you and saying, you know, here's 16 different door styles. These 2 are really the kind that are appropriate for your
Mhm.
style
Yeah.
of house.
That would be
That's
ideal.
what
And if you're not comfortable with that, you can come to the Historic District
Sure.
Commission.
See, that's perfect.
That makes
Yeah.
more sense to me, yeah.
Okay.
Because otherwise they show up with a very styled door on their Queen Anne. 'cause they
Yeah,
just
Right.
didn't
right.
go better.
Because they like that thing, it's a
Exactly.
nice looking thing.
They've
It
seen it,
just
the
doesn't
next
have
door
to be
neighbor
go
has
with-
it and it looks good.
Sure.
They
But the
always want a
guideline can
craftsman
be.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but the-
exactly.
So the guideline can be
Yeah,
helpful in that case. I
Yeah.
agree with you, John.
okay. Okay, and I switched those last 2.
Mhm.
And actually, that guideline will be helpful in other discussions that we'll have too. As larger tear-up projects happen, doors are still gonna come up,
Yeah.
and we can offer guidance, but we'd probably benefit from having guidelines as well.
Mhm.
Okay, moving right along. Dumpsters, trash, recycling, any enclosures, and very rarely do you see one on private property. It's usually tucked behind something or in the garage as opposed to sitting out. But if somebody constructs one, if it's attached to the building and readily visible in the public way, it would be an administrative review. If it's unattached to a building and not visible from public way, I've said, have a nice day. Exterior lighting fixtures, again, this is I think it's, you know, we need a decent set of guidelines for that. And it really falls along the same lines as the door question. You know, what's a fixture that's appropriate with the style of the house, the age of the house, and that character. But I said installation of new, replacement, or removal of lighting fixtures on exterior would be administrative. Installation of freestanding light fixtures in the front yard would be administrative. And replacing an existing fixture with a fixture of similar size, material, and style, go right ahead. So we're not, even if it's the wrong light, even if it's the wrong style for that house, and it's an existing fixture, we're saying go ahead. That's sort of the repair, replace, right or wrong, that's the notion I'm sort of carrying through on this. Fences, new fences and yard walls. I've got B, administrative. Right now, fences come to you. Removal or replacement of existing fences and walls, administrative, and removal of or replacement of historic wrought iron fences. All of those I've said could be administrative. Again, we're reliant on the guidelines as part of that. So I know it's hard to say whether you agree with it or not till you know the guidelines.
Right, that's exactly,
Mhm.
that's my pumping the brakes a little bit, just
Yeah.
because we've had a couple
Yeah.
fence issues come up lately.
Yeah,
So that's why I'm
yeah,
mentally pumping the brakes a little bit on that
Yeah.
one.
yeah. I don't expect you to sign off on all of this until we've gone through the discussion of the guidelines themselves.
Mm.
I think I feel differently, I don't know, can I bring up the point?
Sure.
So, yard walls versus fences. I feel differently, perhaps a little bit, if a wall was erected back when the house was built. I mean, with fences, I mean, maybe I shouldn't separate the two, but I kind of do mentally.
So are you referring to like a masonry wall?
Yeah.
That would be kind of acting like a fence?
Mm-hmm. When I read that, but maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should just lump them all together, so I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. If there's no difference then between the two,
I think it's different, especially if something's been existing for quite a bit of time.
whereas fences come and go depending on
Is there
the conditions.
something like that already here in our district? I'm not aware of like any walls.
Mostly retaining walls are the only things that I can think of.
Centennial Inn has them.
Right, they do.
Mhm.
Oh, that's true.
Mhm.
But it's also a nice thing, I mean, if somebody wanted to do walls like that, Is that, what is,
That falls into administrative approval
Okay.
if they wanted to create one.
The one that jumps out at me is not within the historic district, but along Van Rolte. Someone installed a brick wall along that
Oh,
edge.
yeah.
With the side of the house on Van Rolte. Probably 20th Street or thereabouts.
mm-hmm,
Comfortable so far
Mhm.
without knowing the guidelines? Okay, flat concrete work, we have not reviewed that, and this is continuing that, would not be reviewable. Lengthening or widening existing surface, not reviewable. Paving existing dirt, gravel, stone, or two-track driveway, not reviewable.
Phil, you're gonna hate me on this one. Can I go back to
Go
the
for it.
curb cut?
Yeah,
You know where I'm going.
go for it.
I'm going to 13th Street. When the home that was planned to be potential
B&B.
bed and breakfast,
Mhm.
they were talking about putting a whole new curb cut in front of the house where
Mm.
there aren't. So I'm just bringing up it as a point of discussion here, because I know that there weren't any other homes that had they had the city take down those trees in front of the house so
Mhm.
that they could potentially put in a curb cut and then put a circular drive in front of the home. Are we good with removing front yards in order to do that? So I just,
Not really.
I'm just thinking about
Yeah,
past ones that we've had
Yeah.
potentially come up, cause that was in their initial plan.
yeah.
And it didn't come before us, but then the trees were down, and so with that one, I know that we had lots of questions about putting a circular
Yeah.
drive-in in front.
Mhm.
So I just,
So would you wanna review a curb cut and driveway that occurs in front of the house? Versus, if it's next to the house and takes you to the backyard, I mean, that's pretty standard. But something that's sweeping in front of the house or puts
It-
vehicles in front of the house, that's very
that's,
unusual.
that's different, because I don't think there is any real parking in front of homes for most of the homes, so I feel,
Oh, we should see that.
I feel like we should see that, but the ones that are existing, or take them in order to carve a path to the back of the house, or somewhere where parking would typically be more off the beaten path,
Mhm.
I feel like that's not necessarily needing to
Okay.
be in our purview, but if it changes the approach of the home, then I think it might warrant our looking at it. We may have just flat out approve it, but I think it warrants our looking at it.
Okay.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry,
Oh.
I,
no, that's good. There's also a missed opportunity with the Parks Department saying, okay, we'll cut down the trees.
Mhm.
that was.
Without even thinking about it being in the historic district.
Yeah, that was Parks Department, how would I'm not gonna, let's just go on. That was Parks Department were
It was a news.
incorrectly informed as
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
yeah, that was a mistake.
Okay,
Didn't they plant a new mill tree there?
They did.
yeah. Let's see how long this will last, too.
I know.
Mhm.
Okay.
There must be a bigger one.
So the rest of these on flat concrete work, I've said, all,
Mhm.
no review.
Yeah,
I'll fix the first one.
thank you.
Foundations with guidelines, again, needed. If you're
Scroll.
replacing historic foundation, I've said administrative or repair, I've said at least converse with us. It doesn't necessarily require a certificate, but they need to consult with us before they're repairing the historic foundation. Oh, sorry.
It's okay, I'll drive for you, I don't mind.
It's right in front of me.
You're reading, I'll drive. Replacing historic foundation, repairing historic foundation. And what were you saying about B versus C, that it could be administrative or?
B, just plain B is an administrative review.
Yeah.
B with a C is they need to consult with us. Doesn't require a certificate, but they need to consult with us before they undertake that repair.
I think the consulting is really
Be good.
important because I think a lot of people don't know how to repair homes like that. And I think
Yeah.
about some of the homes we've had that have had multiple foundation
Materials.
elements around them.
Yeah.
Well, that's one where I think we need some help guidelines too, because we don't have Waverly
I
School
was
anymore.
just exactly gonna say that.
Yeah. So we need to be able to, if we're gonna shoot down people's dreams, we need to have some alternatives that are good to offer.
Again, coming to us as a resource versus a hindrance.
Right, and so that could be material samples of others' products, masonry, things, yeah.
Right.
Okay, garages, I'm not sure why I don't have anything there.
I think we kinda hit it, don't you think, in that building that were, maybe because
Maybe in
you
new
tackled it in
construction.
the
Yeah.
one that had to do with the
Moved it
buildings
around.
under 180
Yeah.
square feet versus,
So these
That's
would all
probably
just be
why.
ones over 100.
Okay.
which would fall into that first category.
Andrew, just jump in anytime, just going through the.
I'm
going
doing the
through
same
list.
thing. I just got the word
Okay.
for you.
Gutters and downspouts, again, I've seen some decent guidelines. We don't have them within our ordinance, but, or our materials, but we can add that pretty simply. You've seen a couple of gutters and downspouts recently.
Mhm.
I've said with the right guidelines, those could be administrative review. Landscaping and yard improvements. This is what I mentioned to start with. We've got cultural landscapes thrown out there as a concept. For those that came in a little late, cultural landscapes intended to apply to public open space within the districts. Centennial, the Boulevard,
Yep.
Washington Boulevard could apply, Washington School Green.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe there's another one somewhere. So in cultural landscapes, I'm saying we'll have a set of those guidelines that we shared when we were doing the Van Rolte Farm discussion. Those could apply for those landscapes. But in accordance with an approved park landscape plan, which we don't have in any of the parks yet,
Right.
then that could be approved. It wouldn't require approval as long as it's consistent with the plan.
So with the approved park landscape plan, if there was one existing, would that come before the Historic District Commission if it's part of?
My-
So it's one thing to have an
Yeah.
approved park landscape
Yeah.
plan for the city, but for example, with either the boulevards or with
Yeah.
Centennial Park, would that come before us because it's within the district?
Yeah, my thinking on this was really tied with Centennial and the notion of needing a park plan for
Right.
that. So I would say the same thing about the Boulevard. There ought to be a plan for that. It's a significant landscape in the community.
Mhm.
And yes, I think the Historic District, for both of those, the commission ought to be involved in developing that plan. So that's sort of the expectation of this. Perhaps it's A on both of these until we actually have the plan in place.
You know, I'm passionate. No one's like, everyone knows I'm pretty passionate about Centennial Park. So I personally would prefer an A until we have an approved park landscape plan, because I think if a park landscape plan were developed for the city and didn't take into account the landscaped areas that were part of the historic district, I think that could be an easy miss, and I don't want that to be. For us, I would like to make sure that that's a purposeful space.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if you want to put an asterisk there or just say
And just until it
approved.
exists?
Yeah, exactly. Or we could revisit after.
And
Strategic plan or
again,
master plan.
this cultural landscape, one of the things I prefaced the whole conversation about this was, it would take an ordinance amendment, and I think it's maybe problematic going to council with ordinance with a ordinance amendment, an ordinance amendment, and expect it to just focus on what we want it to focus on. I suspect it could open up a lot of questions about other parts of the ordinance and maybe a debate about other things. But that's my take. Jay could disagree with me on that.
I think it's better, stronger than it was as far as open-mindedness toward it. So, I don't think I'd be afraid of it. You know, we recently had that report about the financial impact the district has had. I think that made an impact on some of my colleagues who their hang up is personal property rights. Don't be telling me what I can and can't do with my property. Well, I think we've demonstrated that there's a time and place for that.
Yeah. And the immediate feedback I've gotten from the parks people is, you know, I gotta ask you when I've gotta take a dead tree down in Centennial Park.
Yeah, but Andy's the same guy who said to us that he'd rather have and maybe
He wants
this
a
is
plan.
that he would rather have a plan that he could
Yeah.
operate to, that we
Yeah.
felt that he had support from. Why not have support from the Historic District Commission to do what he needs to do, which would make it a lot easier for him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the scope of this.
Yeah,
that-
and I think the dead trees are different, that's different than what we're talking about too, right? So I don't know if
Well,
this
that's-
is pretty high level. What's the next step, like after we do that, this is us doing this, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
And agreeing on all these things, so then, do you take it to other city groups or teams?
I've
or-
already asked internally and on this floor, so the building officials and, you know, everybody that deals with that end of things, they've given me their comments. and-
They've weighed in on everything
Yeah.
we're seeing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, this in particular has a different sort of advocacy group out there.
Right.
Or opponents out there that will have concerns about this. They've already expressed them. You know, character defining plant materials, well, what does that mean? You know, what are the character defining plant materials in Centennial Park? You know, the trees are part of that, but, you know, how far down do you go and when do they have to get permission? In absence of a plan, when do they have to get permission to do things? Is something they've got concerns about.
I don't necessarily see putting an A there as like we're saying yes or no. I just see it as we're saying it's project by project basis, or
Yeah.
like it needs to be. It's too hard to generalize on this one, so that's why we're putting A.
Because there is no plan,
Right.
right?
There's no overall guiding principle.
Which Andy has said, this isn't us trying to, this is us trying to support Andy.
Mhm.
The way I look at it is the Historic District Commission supporting Andy and the Parks Department in terms of figuring out what a plan for Centennial Park
Yeah.
is.
Mhm.
That's the way I view it. If they view it as I don't think Andy does. If others view it as adversarial, that's perhaps a mind shift that maybe we have an opportunity to change. But I look at it as supportive.
And maybe could we say TBD or work in progress? Because we were gonna. I think we were gonna continue those type of conversations this year, right? Or try to.
I think we were hoping to.
Yeah. See.
Well, and it could be accompanied by a letter that we all sign that says we advocate for a proper landscape plan for these city-owned areas or something. But plant materials and upkeep of landscapes with dead trees and things is one thing, but then sculptural elements, paths, those kinds of things,
Foundations.
those get roped into here too, which is why,
Dorothy.
I think one
Mhm.
reason why we're a little bit hesitant to
Right.
let it go, because for some reason, some people look at the cultural landscape as lesser than buildings, and so they can do things without doing public engagement and so on.
Well, we've talked about the fact that Centennial Park is kind of a mishmash of things right now without, just because there are some elements in the park that don't seem to hang together in the space that it's in.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's come back to this whole section.
Sorry.
I see what you're saying.
But
You know, this
I
section
I
right
view it
here
as
includes all kinds
supportive
things.
of the parks, but what I'm hearing is that others see that we're being limiting.
I think that's a general consensus with us as a commission, is that we're not necessarily looked on with favor, is that we just limit things, but.
To keep people from destroying 100-year-old homes just because they don't know any better, just like
Yep.
It's stewardship, which is
Mhm.
both constraints and enabling.
And support.
Right, so
It's a lot
it's not
more
that
to
we're not
it.
supporting Parks Department, it's that.
We
um,
just wanna help, basically.
Yeah, and we wanna help them ensure that they're doing really great work.
I don't know, I could say something really unfavorable. I mean, the city found setting up I'm feisty, it's the first week of the The city found it really important to set up a historic district commission for a reason. I would hope, if they didn't find it valuable, then we would be looking at dissolving it, but they find it valuable, but then,
But to an extent.
but when it
Value
suits.
when it's
Yes.
convenient.
Yes, thank you, when it's convenient, and that's not how, I would prefer that we would be viewed again as supportive.
Well, I think you said it earlier, it's a change of mindset.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's come back to that section. Masonry repair. Tuck pointing, repair, and cleaning of masonry, again, this is, we want to advise on this.
Absolutely, so 14th Street, the Vanaclazen brick house that happened last year is a great example of why it's important that involvement in terms of advisory is.
Is
I'll
it-
tell you, it's tough after the fact to go back and get something like that changed.
Yes,
So,
agreed.
And for the most part, that one was from Grace, right? Like, did we review that?
No.
We
It just
didn't,
happened, right?
because
It just
the
happened.
house,
Mhm.
the upstairs caved in, so,
It was Hazard.
right.
Okay.
So it caved in, so it went to her for an immediate approval in the
Mhm.
process, and all the documentation showed that it was going to match the existing masonry that was
Yeah.
there, and then it didn't.
Yeah.
So,
Matches.
yeah, match.
They probably thought they did it.
Yeah, and it didn't,
So it was administrative. In
It was-
that case, it
It's
was
the same way
administrative
the
approval.
bell tower at the church was administrative, because it was coming down,
It had
so,
to come down straight away.
right.
Yep.
It was another,
But this, when I read
Urgent.
this as B, that means it's administrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
it's administrative
Unless you're
advisory, basically.
Yeah.
They come in and say, we're gonna do this, and we will say, well, you can't sandblast, you can't, whatever those standards are, you can't do this. And then they'll understand that, presumably understand that going in. We could just make it, we could take the C off of that and just make it require a certificate of appropriateness for that.
I think masonry is one of those things that's potentially pretty tricky, especially with some of the very, like, that's a tricky one for me.
Well, historic masonry, if you look at masonry that's hundreds of years old, it's got patchwork that doesn't match all over it, because masonry does have to be repaired.
Right.
And so that's kind of, like, if you look at the Park Theater wall, it's like,
Or- or-
Mosaic.
yeah.
Yeah, or our chimney's the same way.
Right.
I worked with a historic preservation architectural firm, and we did a lot of brickwork.
I bet.
And we always required sand and mortar and testing the hardness and matching colors, and, I mean, there
Very,
is a
very
process
hard.
to go through,
Mhm.
but it's more than I think anybody around here does. It's kind of, an eyeball, and you get a good eyeball, maybe you're in good shape,
But that kind of service would be appropriate for, say, Graves Hall on Hope Campus or this
Mhm.
building, but it wouldn't be appropriate for residential. That expectation wouldn't really be appropriate for residential use anyway. Residential architecture is inherently more casual, and over time will have sort of patchwork to it.
I would say it depends on the scale of what they're proposing. If it's relatively simple patching in a few places, but the example on 14th Street where they
Was
took a whole
significant.
section out.
Do you think we could put the caveat that maybe instead of the C in parentheses, that it's A? Where it comes to you for approval, and if you think that they need to come see us, that you send them our way?
Well, I can do that. My assumption is under all the Bs, I can do it
Anyway.
anyway.
Yeah, okay.
I'll just take the little C off of it. So they've got to get a certificate.
And that might be one that's more, we have the opportunity to educate,
Mm-hmm.
not approve or deny, but the opportunity to educate, I guess, is where my head's at.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good idea.
We should
again,
get like a
guidelines.
traditional mason in town who does old mortar and Waverly stone, then across the brick, we'll be all set.
Got a line on that?
Here you go, Nick.
Yeah.
It'd be great if I had the materials.
That'd be
Yeah.
cool, wouldn't it?
So the solution was to just remove the C.
Uh,
Right.
That becomes a pure.
That's where I am with
Yeah,
it.
I think that's,
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Mechanical equipment, again, needing some guidelines, but suggesting roof and wall mounted mechanical equipment should be administrative. Pad mounted air conditioners where visible and within 50 feet of the right of way should be administrative. This doesn't say, I need something in here that says what's A, what the commission reviews.
so we reviewed wall-mounted mechanical equipment that was on the fascia of the house that was street-facing. I was thinking about Spring's house.
Spring Suite.
Yeah.
But it was part of a bigger application too, right?
It was.
The mechanical vent on Spring Suites house that you're talking about, the one that's, yeah.
Yeah, that fireplace.
Yeah.
So that's the. Someone speak up other than me.
So are you voting for the third one to turn to A? Is that what you're saying, Kim?
I'm thinking.
I think it's,
Or the top?
yeah, I actually, if it's, well,
It has been fireplaces.
yeah, fireplaces end
Gas
up being an
inserts,
issue
right?
when people wanna install gas fireplaces and they're using a chase that's already there, or a new one, and so they're wall mounting. But I know Springs came before us, and so that's why I was thinking about this one.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it requires modification of the exterior of the building.
Right,
too, so it's
which
punching a
was-
hole in it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that one was pretty egregious, and I know we approved it, but
I
it was
know,
like
I
right
think that's
there.
why it's giving me heartburn, because I felt the same way.
Well, at least you had the
I-
landscape. I mean.
So I think in
you
that
know?
case, for me, it was like the intent of the homeowner to improve the it wasn't I don't know, I have mixed feelings. Anyway, I think that if
So.
pad mounted, no issue, that's exterior to the
Yeah.
home as far as I'm concerned. But even Gunner's house has come before us when he wanted to move the vent for what, about a year and a half
Dryer.
ago? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like anything and that was on the side, that was moving it to the side of from the back
I
of the
wanna
house
say
to the side, am I
It
right?
went up a few like feet or something,
Yeah,
like
but it
further
was,
towards the street.
Mhm.
Yeah, because it was at the
Along
back
the
of the house.
driveway.
right,
Mhm.
So do I need a separate line in here that deals with vents and things of that scale?
possibly,
That might help
I think-
separate it out.
right, so that roof and wall mounted mechanical equipment, like your
Like an air handling
electric
unit or-
meter or whatever is,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have control over that, right? They come, they stick it on the house and voila, it's there when you pull in from work, so. But the other things, like that with moving the vent or with the gas vent on Springs, I wonder if maybe another line item might be helpful to separate.
Okay. Okay, work through that. Moving buildings. Moving buildings off of a historic site or moving buildings into the historic district. Said both of those get an A.
All good.
Yes.
No.
No argument. Sorry, Bill's wishing I didn't show up tonight. Okay.
No, this is good. This is good. New
That is
construction.
Stephanie's
clear from
laughing.
there.
I know.
That's funny.
New construction. Construction of new buildings and additions to existing buildings. I've said A.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Accessory structures such as gazebos, sheds, or other roof structures over 200 square feet. I've said A, I'll make that 180 square feet, so it's
Oh,
consistent
consistent with the
other one.
garage issue from before.
Thanks for
Alright,
coming.
have a good night, guys.
You too.
Take care.
You too, I'll see you guys next month.
Okay,
Construction of new or alteration with addition to outbuildings having a square footage less than 180.
so that's altering, like if they have a shed and they wanna turn it into a garage, that's a administrative approval?
That's what this says at the moment. I guess is it?
I'm wondering if, I think that most people would tear down what they had existing and build something new rather than try to cobble something together, but I'm just wondering.
I'm just asking myself, is the 180 square foot, is that before they put the addition on, or is that
Good
after the
question.
addition?
Well, it seems to me if the if it made it into something bigger than 180 square feet, then it
It
would
should come
jump
to
to the A. That-
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah,
if they're
that
doubling
works.
the size of the shed to make it a garage, that's a,
Then it's an A.
yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Tweak that a little bit. Painting, right now it says, we don't care what you paint your house. I mean, it's essential, that's sort of
Stresses me
the line everybody knows in the district.
But your first point is the
Yeah.
one that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, good.
Just me.
If you're painting
I have a thing for brick and
unpainted
trees.
surfaces-
I think if they want to paint brick, they should come to you and you should say no.
Yes, or you can come to us and we'll say no.
Seriously.
I think there should be guidelines, because there is a way to render brick that isn't latex paint, but there is a proper way to do it. Nobody does it around here, but
I don't think we're super good at pointing them in the right direction either.
Right.
We say it about it, you say it as well as anyone does. So it's, I mean, making them come to us, that's all we would tell them, right?
Well,
But
if they
there
came
could
to
be a
us, we'd
guideline.
say, do not
Right.
paint your brick house.
We'd either say
Don't
that.
do it.
What if
Yeah.
somebody wants to
Or
paint
do it
one of
right.
those Keppel's Village Cottage? Or what if the new owner of bed and breakfast wants to paint
You know.
the brick?
We should be like, if you live in the district, you can't go to the paint store.
Unless
I
Stephanie
seriously,
approves
well, like
it.
the
Sorry,
person that
your
painted my
account has been red
house.
flagged.
That's right.
Can't buy anything here.
Can't.
what if
But a
somebody's
note
got
from-
Waverly Stone that's eroding and they wanna protect it?
Well, we did that on 14 East 12th Street. They protected it with a sealant to protect the Waverly Stone, which was all crumbling. It was when the Scott Strook owned it before the dentist owned it, and it's for sale now, or maybe it's been sold. On 12th Street across from the Science Building, between College and Central. And they did paint the brick in order to, with a really thick sealant in order to protect it.
Preserve.
Okay. That makes sense.
But this sealant, is this the right sealant to use, or could we have a guideline that would at least say like, hey, this is gonna help the foundation breathe, or the brick breathe, or whatever? I think there's ways you can just totally destroy a house by painting it if it's brick, but there's
Yep.
also things you can put on it that look like paint, but it's actually not technically paint.
Yeah, to protect that.
Yeah, and it
that
breathes and
makes
it-
sense.
And that's what I'm saying, is if
Yep.
we had some guidance on that, at
Mhm.
least.
I
Yep.
think it's
Somebody-
twofold though, right? We still wanna see the application first,
Yes, because
and then decide whether it's
Oh,
worth
yeah, I
passing
tend
the
to agree, I
guidelines
guess,
on.
I do
You-
agree with that, yeah.
So it'd be the first one would be an A.
Yeah,
So-
I guess my comment is separate, is just like, hey, I think we need a guideline for
It's
that.
not just a hard no.
Yeah.
No.
oh, right, I'm not saying a hard no.
Right.
I, to the point about painting the Waverly brick because it's crumbling, the right guidance, again, right?
Right.
Offering guidance. Painting a Vanaclasen brick home because they want to live in a purple house versus a brick colored house would, that's for me, a different thing.
It's a tragedy if that happens.
I would. That's it.
I think a good point, some guidelines would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have this library of guidelines, and this is just another one of those categories.
Right.
Yeah. The second one, my intent in this is pressure treated wood should be painted
Absolutely.
after it's dried out, you know.
Which isn't it supposed to be? Because I don't think you can have, or isn't it supposed to be? Or at least painted or
There's
stained?
an awful lot of work in the neighborhood that
Oh,
has
tell me
never
about
been
it.
painted. And it's-
Mhm.
I'm fine with that one as
Mhm.
as noted.
Yeah.
And then other painting,
Yep.
you know, a change of colors or whatever on
Yep.
a wood clapboards.
All
permanent
good.
They
stain.
can do what they wanna do.
Okay, porches, this one was pulled out from a couple of different other sections. Construction of or additions to existing porches and stoops. Says A, converting exterior porch opener enclosed into a year-round interior space. I've said A.
Yes.
Replacement of trim, railings, handrails, and steps. A. That should be, it's not replacement in kind, is not intended.
Oh, this is if they want to change the style of the trim
Yeah.
or the,
Yeah.
because your next one is about existing.
Yeah, that's the
changes
like
the
for like,
size, okay.
Right,
Okay.
so I think you're good. So the
Okay.
first one is if they wanna change the style of the handrails
Yeah.
from wood to wrought iron. The
Yeah.
second is if they have wood and it's rotten and they wanna replace it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On that, I think columns in particular would get roped in with like trim railings, handrails, whatever.
That's a
But
good
it's,
point.
those people all the time go, yeah, I just got the same one. It's not the
It's not the
same.
same.
The
Spring had
profiles
that.
aren't the same, exactly.
Yeah, okay,
So I
good point.
think that needs to come before the commission so that we can at least say like, hey, that is,
Columns seem to be a harder thing to, I think people think, oh, it's a column, it's a column, it's a
yeah,
column.
exactly.
Yeah, so columns are a special,
Proportions are important.
right.
They are,
So
and
Whether
do
they're
you-
tapered, whether
ionic
they're,
or Doric and the proportions, and whether it's a little, yeah, I mean, it's,
And it's even true on the, like, we had to replace turned posts, and we could not find ones they were probably 6x6, and everything is cut out of a 4x4 now, so they're just thinner than I really wanted, but, you know, other than having them milled, you know, it just, or finding 4 of the same kind in a salvage yard, it's,
that's what we did.
yeah.
It was, my kids won't go to college because of our front porch.
Also, on porches, should we have removal of porches, because that's not on the list,
Hmm.
and that's one that I feel like we should weigh in on.
Yep,
Yeah, okay.
that's a good one.
Just at the end, I think the other places you have removal
Yep.
kind of as the last item of the,
Okay, roofs.
What's just the last one that is listed, replacement of existing
Oh.
porch floor with materials?
With
Is there a
different-
word missing?
Yeah, different materials.
Different materials. Okay.
And that's an open question. I don't know what all you've approved.
If
No,
it's-
considered some,
Mhm. If it's
Some other
been
materials.
like for like, that's
yeah.
one thing to replace when there's been a porch where boards have rotted over time because the porch is open. But when somebody says, oh, we're gonna replace the floor with what's there already, well, it's wood, but replacing it with 2x4s is different than replacing it with tongue and groove. And that's where we've come into that hair splitting of, we're replacing the porch is wood, we're replacing it with wood versus, but the porch was tongue and groove wood, and
and
now
they're
you're replacing
putting
it.
decking
Thank
basically
you,
on it.
yes.
Yeah.
That's where we've
Decking.
run into,
Mhm.
Or changing it to a vinyl product.
Uh-huh.
well, it was the wood one before. I remember a couple times we've said, well, no, we're replacing it, it's wood, we're replacing it with wood,
Mhm.
but it
Yeah.
was going
Yeah.
from the tongue and groove that was originally there to a decking material.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time talking about the transition or the edge details
Right.
at the stairs and
Yep.
what the exposed
Mhm.
Edge was gonna look like and how that was gonna be
And
handled and.
I mean, I think if this stays the way it's written with B, that you have the option to approve it, Phil. I mean, Grace had the option to approve that because it was wood for wood. She just chose to bring it to the,
Mhm.
Yeah.
or she would have had the option. She just chose to bring it to us, right? So, I guess I'm still thinking on Nick's way of saying it, like, administratively, you could still approve different materials if you wanted to. You would just need to bring it here if you didn't have confidence in the details. So this is what we're talking about. Kim's not agreeing.
I'm not
Kim's saying
agreeing.
A. for
I'm
this
saying
one.
A only because it's literally attached to the home. It's not like a fence that's attached that runs around the perimeter like
Okay.
some of the others. And the reason I'm saying A is because what Phil had charged us with thinking about before is that Phil may not always be here. I mean, look, we've already seen it change from Karen to Grace to Phil.
Yeah.
So because you have the stewardship to say, I'm good with that or I'm not good with that and I want to bring it before the district does not mean that somebody following Phil will.
yeah, even if you're out for a few months and another planning staff member has to put on a
Sure.
hat.
Mhm.
Be
Go back to the
safer.
guidelines. Do we have adequate guidelines for it?
Right.
And right now right.
Yeah.
Well, we can revisit some of those, once we have all the guidelines in place, then we could
I
still
think
say.
this is when we need to asterisk for
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
My intent is to pull together all of our guidelines
Mhm.
into one package. Go through that with you so that we know where there are gaps
Yeah.
and where we need to beef up something. Until then, I'd say most of these are probably A's.
Yeah, it's
Right.
moving that
But we're trying to
direction.
get to the point of changing
having,
that.
of being more friendly to the
Yeah.
people who live in the district and giving you the ability to, because there are guidelines, make decisions on this that
Yeah.
don't take them a month.
But it's
while they're
critical that
sitting
it's
on
either
it.
me or it's Mallory too, or, somebody across the hall if we're not around,
Right.
so.
Which is why I
Yeah.
mentioned the point that you had brought up, that it needs to be for, it's one thing if it's you, if it's somebody else, we need to make sure that they're given the guidelines,
Yeah.
that they can make that informed decision.
Yeah.
So so in talking through it, I actually don't think it matters whether it says different materials or like materials. This one we would want to see.
The replacement of the porch material, because different materials, it's wood
It-
for wood
we
could be
just said wood
considered
for
like,
wood.
right.
Correct. So it's just any replacement of the existing porch flooring would be reviewed by the HDC.
Because porch flooring could be an enclosed porch inside their home, or it could be an
We've seen
open porch.
so many different.
See, yeah,
Things for
it's
that.
I wouldn't interpret it that way. I would interpret it like for like would be, if you had tongue and groove there, you'd have to replace it with tongue and groove.
And that is not how, but that's because you are
Hmm.
aware of that, but
Mhm.
again, it's an education thing, right? So the ones that we've seen come before have been, well, it's wood. It is wood, but it's not tongue and groove, it's wood decking. That, I think that was an eye
I
opener,
just-
that one was an eye opener for me.
Mhm.
I
Well,
had to replace my garage doors, and I did talk with Grace about it, and she was like, as long as you replace like for like, you're good, and you don't need to do anything. I didn't have to come here for a COA. So I took that to mean that if I tore my garage door completely apart and rebuilt it with the exact same materials, but new, that it would all be good. And so I made the tongue and groove door, and I spent like a lot of money to make it look that way, and it looks like my old door that's next to it. So it's just, I guess, what does like for like mean? I guess if that's open to interpretation, I don't understand that.
Right, but your stewardship of like for like, meaning
Yeah.
tongue and groove for
Yeah.
tongue and groove is different than, I have a wood door, I'm gonna replace it with a wood door.
See, now I think if I was gonna replace my front door with another wood door, I'd have to have it built exactly the same.
Or
And
even a
not,
similar style, at least that stylistically would match the house, yeah.
And if you came in with that garage door that you you basically reverse engineered that garage door and rebuilt it, if you came in we would all give the COA,
we'd all be giving you a high five in the
That's right,
COA,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
but yes, you have to go through that extra step in that case. But I think the tongue and groove example is a good example for the porch decking, but also that column example is the same thing.
It's the
like
same thing.
People
It's-
gloss
It's a
over it
column.
and they go, hey, no one's really
Mhm.
looking at this. I'm just
Mhm.
gonna buy this thing from Menards, and it's like totally different.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like the signature of the house is the column.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's sad when you see how many porches in the historic district have been replaced with basically a front deck on the house with, those deck railing.
Mhm.
I mean, just like they bought the kit and stuck it on the front of their house and.
They did.
I think that's a great question, though. What does like for like mean? And I think our guidelines have to be clear enough to tell you what that means on each of these items.
I mean, this is a lot of work, but it's really gonna pay off in the long run to have those sort of questions answered, so. This is great to go through this.
Okay, roofs. Again, guidelines are needed, and in fact, like for like was a question that came up on Amy
Haygood.
Haygood's roof. I think she's done it. I haven't been by there lately. I'm not sure if she's replaced it yet or not. But it was an asphalt roof, and she was replacing it with asphalt. But it was a totally different character of appearance of that roof.
Whether it was the little acorny
Yeah,
ones versus,
yeah. And there's probably one contractor in the area that does the roof like existed, and it was 2 or 3 times the cost of, so, you know, there's a lot of things that come into how do you define like for like, and what do you allow ultimately?
I personally view that the roof, unless it's a slate roof or a clay roof, I kind of view asphalt shingles, knowing that they have a certain life that is not 100+ years old,
Yeah.
the same way that I view the fences to a degree. That's just my opinion. It was not meant for all eternity, right, when it was
Okay,
installed.
so the third one on this, replacement of existing roofing material with identical material without installation of new roof or attic vents or alteration of resources detail. You can have a nice day. Now, if they're gonna start adding, like a ridge vent to it, or other vents on the roof, I'm saying that begins to raise a question. Does it still say, have a nice day, or do you get into a review, administrative review with that? I've said installation of attic and roof vents should be
Mhm.
at least an administrative review. A ridge vent's very common.
Yep.
You know, almost everybody, you know, when they do a new roof today, they put a ridge
Put a
vent
ridge
in.
vent.
So alteration of roof lines, construction of dormers, replacement of existing roof material with something different, that's all comes to the commission. Roof vents would be administrative, and solar shingles on a roof, which we haven't seen yet, I don't believe. That would come to the commission until we figured that out.
Is that something different than a solar panel, solar shingles?
Yeah, they are, and
Okay,
they're
they're
kind of
actually-
actually flush with the
Okay,
roof,
so they don't have
with
that.
the asphalt shingles
Okay.
themselves, they just,
Mhm.
they look like you've pieced in asphalt shingles, but they have a different look to them.
Yeah.
But that's a good question, should solar panels be included with this? That's
Solar panels or shingles,
Yeah,
Yeah.
couldn't hurt to add that as a and.
okay. Okay.
Or just say technology, solar technology,
That's right,
be more generic.
that's right.
Satellite dish antenna and small cell antenna, placement of new and replacements on the building within view from the public way. I've said administrative within front and street fronting side yards, administrative within the rear yards. Have a nice day. Siding?
So that is, if it's on the back of the house, but facing the rear yard,
On the back of the house and really not visible.
not just in the yard, but in
Yeah.
on
You're
the
just asking for
home,
clarity on what within rear yards means.
right.
Is that the not
Are-
visible from street kind of?
It's not on the building.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. The first one's on the building.
Yeah.
Are the second and third ones also on the building? Or are they in the yard?
Second one was intended in the yard.
Is the third one?
Third one would be in the yard, but not visible from the street is what was intended.
So if it's on the building, we see it. If it's in the yard and we can't see it, who cares?
Which is
I
the
mean, have a
last
nice
one.
day, right?
Mhm.
Okay, but I want,
Yeah.
But you.
because the
yeah.
first one is on the building with view of public way, but the last one is just in
Yeah.
the back, but I don't know if it's on the building in the back and you can't see it or not.
I could simplify it and say on the building or in the
Administrative.
yard within view from the public way.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
the
then
same
we have-
Then it gets
with not
reviewed.
view.
And then just not view, that's not reviewable.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you'd only have 2 items.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Siding, we're getting there.
My favorite topic.
They're all reviewed by us.
Yeah.
Siding,
Yep.
Yeah, it is, other than wood siding, trim repairs in kind.
Is that replacing siding with boral or fiber cement materials? Or is that boral
Or.
of fiber?
Yep, or,
Okay.
I could just say, replacing with alternative
Or engineering.
materials, because I
Yeah.
don't want to necessarily encourage these
Yeah.
either.
Right, you don't feel
I
like, oh,
think
it's
being
just
more
Laurel
generic
on there.
would be good.
Say junky other materials.
Just-
Okay, not emotional.
Yeah,
just
what Mark
generic.
said. Thank you.
Oh, my.
I'm with him.
Okay.
Wood siding, trim repairs in kind, that's, again,
It's a little debatable.
like for like.
Skylights and solar panels, well, here we come back to solar panels.
Yeah,
With
lots of solar.
guidelines. So, let's see what we do with that. Do invisible from public way on roof or facades. I'm not sure what we said just a minute ago on this.
I thought we
Do we
said
have it
solar
in there?
was coming to, if it was on the property, it was coming to you as a B. If it was at the rear yard and not on the property, it was a have a nice day.
Well, we had solar shingles and panels on the roof was an A.
Mhm.
So skylights
But
and
here we
solar
have siding
panels
on
And we have-
should be A instead of B then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if we're
Yes.
consistent.
Oh, yeah, because any cut in the roof line of the home, if we are saying that ridge vents are yes, it should be an A. And not visible from the public way, I think should still be,
At least to be.
yeah, at the very least a B.
Okay. Stacks and vents, maybe we've covered it already. I'll just compare that to, we talked about it.
Yeah.
But, swimming pools, hot tubs and spas, etc., not attached to the building. Said have a nice day.
Yep.
Windows,
Oh,
again,
fun.
we've got some guidelines.
Can I just ask on that swimming pools, that if somebody has a hot tub on their porch, is that something then that reviewable or not really?
If it cuts
Yeah.
into a historic porch, if somebody has it's a good point. Because does not say whether it's, in ground or above ground. In ground applies, it's not attached to the home. Above ground could be attached to the porch.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
somebody in the Macatawa district that put one on a front porch, and I just was curious if that would be allowed in historic districts or.
Yeah, no.
It's a hard no.
No.
Okay.
Kind of hold my stomach in long.
Right, yeah, it depends on the age of the occupants.
Come to our block,
We
you see all
have a
kinds of
test
crazy
here.
stuff.
Bathing suit test.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, I'll play around with that a little
we'll
bit to
just forget.
clarify that.
Yeah, if it's on the property but not attached or on or touching the house, that's different than,
So does that mean in the front yard?
I don't know, now
Next
you
to
got
the-
me.
Next to the
There's
paved-
gotta be some
There's
sort
gotta
of.
be-
Just say not
There's
allowed.
gotta be some sort of
Yeah.
permit that we don't have to deal
You don't
with.
need
It's
it.
kinda like
Yeah.
you can't park in
That-
your
that
front
may be
lawn,
covered
you
elsewhere.
can't like
Touch
hot
one
tub,
invented after
you can't hot tub time machine in your front yard. I don't know. There's gotta be something like that.
Yeah, there probably is.
I'm hot tubbing over 40.
Is that the age of the house or the age of the?
Yeah.
The hot tub
Okay,
occupant.
historic hot tub.
Okay, windows. Again, we've got guidelines on windows. This says repair, replace, same design, same size, whatever, same material is C. Have a nice day.
Rehab or repair, replace is different.
Rehab or repair, correct. Replace, I've said is B. If it's matching size, shape, and materials and opening, that would be a B, administrative. Mhm. If it's different in any of those features, then it comes to the commission. If you're removing, covering an infill, or infilling a window, that
Comes
should
to
come to
us.
the commission.
I feel like these are easier. I mean, we do have better guidelines on windows, right? It's-
Yeah, we do.
And a lot more.
Good time.
Are we,
or more familiarity.
Let's see. Basement windows, that seems to come up fairly regularly.
material?
This is suggesting rehabbing, repairing in kind, the same materials. You go ahead and do it. Repair, replace existing windows with different materials, size. I've said administrative, not visible from the public way. I've said no review.
We need to see it,
Okay,
because
That's
we've
the
got
question.
glass block windows.
yep.
So
Oh.
I
I would agree.
think
Okay.
that should not be a C.
So
Or
if
you
it's-
need to.
So those last two.
Yeah, it could be
needs to
you,
see
but it
Someone
needs
needs
to,
to see it.
right,
So the
Glass
last
block
two could
windows are
both
not
be
okay.
Bs, they could be Bs, the last two.
That's something we need to put in the guidelines.
Guidelines.
Create
In the
glass
guidelines,
block
the
is
glass
not
block
acceptable.
aren't acceptable.
Period.
Is that a period? Have you ever approved glass block?
no.
Never.
It is period, but it's not period in Holland.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Say a little more, Nick.
Oh, the
Well-
glass block, there is,
Like,
Yeah.
There was
will
a-
do it. We've seen lots of presentations on it, right?
Yeah.
right,
It's just, we haven't opened that door yet.
Right.
Frank Lloyd Wright used them. I mean,
Yeah.
they are historic as all get out, but they just weren't here.
They weren't
in
used.
Holland when the district was built, so we don't have them.
and there may be other homes that are not in the district now, but would qualify for the district that may have them where it'd be appropriate, but again, that's age of home.
Mm.
And during my time on the commission, we've actually had people tear them out.
Right.
We've actually got it
Yes.
written out for them and had them removed.
Same,
Yep.
Okay, so the next step on this, I'll revise these, and we'll start pulling together the design guidelines, and then I'll come back to you with that discussion.
can I
Go ahead.
ask a very controversial question?
No.
So, greenhouse, sorry.
It's on the agenda.
But, okay, but I'm looking at these guidelines and I'm saying, is roof material,
Is wait, what?
like the roof material,
Mhm.
like where would the greenhouse fit within that? Or where would, maybe I should just leave this alone.
Greenhouse is its own separate norms.
Yeah, I think that's, ultimately, that's gonna be part of the discussion as we get into the greenhouses.
I will
because-
pause.
Because it's just single glazing, single glass glazing,
Yep.
not tempered.
Right,
It's gonna have to be something different if it's gonna survive, just from safety reasons.
We're hiding from
Yeah,
it.
that's a good question.
I just wonder if, because it's different than,
So in that line of thinking, it would fall under the replacement with a not similar material.
right,
So then it would just be part of the application.
So if you had
Right.
We'd have to
like
talk
an
about
old
Yeah.
conservatory that was built
Right.
onto a house,
yes.
then you would
And
have
they
to.
wanted, I'm thinking about the so I only mentioned the greenhouse, but non-traditional, what we think of as non-traditional home. We have traditional homes that we usually see because the applicants are usually homeowners. But every once in a while, we get a wild card, and that would be a wild card.
Mhm.
That's my thinking, or my question. That's what my head's at.
I sent out a survey today to everybody, you may not have seen it yet. The Michigan Historic Preservation Network is doing a survey because they're trying to gear up for a conference this summer. I'm looking for, they wanna do what they call it, I forget what they call it, their focus group with historic district commissioners. And a session focused on what their needs are. I responded to it this afternoon, and one of the things I said is, how do you deal with new materials? As one of the challenges we're just beginning to face. But I'll get a chance to fill it out and send in the comments on that. I'm a little behind schedule, so let me see if I can catch up here a little bit.
Sorry, I asked too many questions.
No, that's good, that's good. I sent out the Certified Local Government Community Partnership material. This is what they had talked to us about this past fall. They have a new program where they provide assistance, they're not providing money, but they will do some work for us. And they expect in-kind contributions and time from at least a staff member and at least one commission member, with the idea that if it's survey work, they're building the knowledge and the ability of the community to do their own survey work. If it's design guidelines, same sort of thing, you'll be able to figure out how to do your own design guidelines. And they also had, there's actually a third category that I didn't mention in the outline, which is National Register nominations. They will also do National Register nominations.
Oh, very cool.
So I'm trying to figure out how best to respond to this, and it's a February 3rd deadline, I think. And a couple of thoughts on design guidelines. You know, we've just been talking about design guidelines. If we could narrow the scope of what we need, it might be something that could fit into their ability to assist us in pulling those together. If it's survey work, I had a thought about, I'll pass these around. I'll just take a pass it. Areas for survey work, we've talked about downtown. What they talk about is a reconnaissance level survey. So it's a pretty broad, doesn't get into a lot of detail, and I think we generally have that for the downtown area. That's a little bit out of date, some buildings have disappeared, some buildings have been altered, so there might be an updating of that reconnaissance level for downtown. But then I've also said, that's the top circle, there's 3 circles on here, the top one isn't all that legible, but the area in gray is the historic district, basically. So there's an area south of that, but abutting the historic district, that might be an area to do a reconnaissance level survey. Or go down a little further and pick up the triangle area down there. And interestingly enough, as I was walking out of the room to come over here, I noticed this is our infill review area. There's also out in Central Park neighborhood is an area, so there's some special ordinance requirements for review of work in these areas. But it essentially takes it down to 24th Street, because that historically the progression of home building, you know, there was a change in style, change in the period of construction south of 24th Street. So I was thinking that sort of mimicked the notion of getting a reconnaissance level survey of that maybe that whole area. They commit to about 250 houses, or 250 properties is what they're looking at. And any one of these could be a lot more depending on where you specifically draw the boundaries, but.
Right.
So I'm looking for whether you think we should focus it on design guidelines. If we put in a request at all, do you want to focus on design guidelines? Do you want to focus on survey work? I don't know of any National Register nominations that are sitting out there waiting to be tackled.
Well, certainly the design guidelines would move along this project, because that's the next step, right, is to somehow mesh the appropriate design guidelines with all the points so that we have a complete document. So if there were areas, like if we have windows already kind of scoped out, maybe could we choose a few of the other where we don't have maybe chimneys or something that are more slippery, or we haven't, no porches or something where we could ask for help on those, you know, specific ones that, I mean, maybe you can review and see what we have and say, yeah, we're thin here, let's have help.
Yeah,
Can we-
that could be
how-
their step one. is to-
How often can we ask for?
Right, yeah, that was my
Can it be a
next.
3-year plan or something like that? This year we ask for help with design guidelines, and in 3 years or 5 years we ask for help with expanding further.
There was nothing in here that said you couldn't apply for one of each,
Gotcha.
so.
But I tend to agree with Mark. I feel like we need to have the guidelines in place before we have the boundary to get.
Yeah, I think
That's where my head's at.
to focus on one and define it would be good.
Yeah, my only hesitation in this is that we'll be doing this in a way that the certified local government is comfortable defining guidelines. I don't know how much interaction there is other than one person or maybe a couple of people that are working with them as they develop it. There's less interaction with the community on those. So I don't know how in alignment what we just talked about for the last hour is with where they come out on who reviews what or how significant certain issues are.
But it feels like
That's
we
to be
have,
said.
you know, something it's more easy to edit it than disagree with it or respond to it than it is to come up with it from scratch. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, at least that's the way it is for me. I can
Yeah.
respond more easily than I can just sit down and think of 20 guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thought going through my head as we're piling up guidelines is, wow, that's gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I think both survey work and guidelines
Mhm.
are a lot of work, and I'd feel a lot more comfortable if the guidelines were in place.
Yeah.
The survey work, we've been promising CLG in the past of getting stuff done and it hasn't gotten done.
Right.
We can nip away at bits and pieces of that, but to do the comprehensive survey pieces is something we just don't have the budget for. So, okay, well, I'll scope out maybe both and
Yeah.
and indicate maybe that our preference is the guidelines, but if there's additional funding available, they've gotten some inquiries, so there's people interested.
I don't know a lot about the actual history of the development of housing, but I've always liked that area, Elmdale, Lawndale, and that kind of, and I think if I was gonna just be curious about an area to maybe zoom in on, that, I don't know what, I have no idea how many 250 houses is, but if you went, I don't know what, 19th to 24th and Michigan to, or maybe Columbia to River or something, something in that quadrant. Personally, I'd be curious about what's in there. There's some interesting places.
I know there are a lot of houses that are just south of the existing district. There are a lot of blocks that are transitional, where possibly just a survey of what's still historic versus things that may have become historic based on how they've been viewed. I mean, we see that on our own block, for example.
Okay, that feedback's helpful. Good, thank you. Next thing from CLG is their annual report. I sent you a copy of that. I've been marking up a version of that. Thanks, Mark, for your resume. Pierre, I'll need a resume from you. You'll see on page, I think I made copies. They just want it for new members, so you two get lucky.
Good.
Yeah.
The music man, I was looking for my credentials.
That's right.
Yeah. I guess the rest of you are just some average
That's right.
Just a couple of questions in this, just because I wasn't around and don't know all the detail. I'm wondering from Mark and Pierre, how were you approached to be on the commission? Was there a general ad that went out, or did you just get a phone call from somebody or from another commissioner?
Yeah, we
My
both
fault.
know John Shea. Yeah.
Okay.
Grace had asked me about people who live right near me, and I thought of both of them.
And
Suggested
Jean
them,
Pierre, we've seen
And they both said
with
yes.
Yeah.
with a budding, you have come and spoken to the commission based on projects that were, right?
And Mark's probably lived in the district longer than.
So I was
Most of us.
approached by Grace and John.
Okay. All right. I know they made in the critique they did of the program, they made it clear they want us to be touching base with the historical society and, far and wide, sort of getting word out that there are these openings, and particularly for the professional position, which I'm sort of roping Nick into as the.
Well, I think Andrew too.
Oh, Andrew.
too,
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay,
But
But
I'm
you,
terming out,
right,
yeah.
so I don't know what.
So take a month off and then come back.
That's right, a month off, that's what I get.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. So how we go out and seek specifically some expertise, historic expertise, architecture or building or whatever. So there's a question about that I've got to respond to. Wondering about the education and training you've had. There was the Michigan Historic Preservation Network had their conference here last year.
that was great.
Did everybody get involved in that?
I did,
I think
Nick
a
did.
little, I was there.
I went to
Okay.
a little bit.
Cocktails, anyway.
That's good. John,
I was out of town.
you were out.
Yeah,
Andrew?
and I was gone too with it.
Okay, okay. Jay, how about you? I'm
I
gonna
did.
include you in this.
I attended the,
Okay.
one of the sessions, the Saturday morning windows thing.
Okay.
That's right.
Then in July, there was a training session that I know Mark and I were at, and Mallory was at.
It got, I think that was the one the date got changed on and I was traveling for work.
Yeah,
I was out of town.
Uh-uh.
okay. I just don't want to miss anybody if
Yeah.
they were there. Okay.
Was that the one at the library?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was bummed it got
Yeah.
Oh,
changed.
that's right, I think I was gonna go to it when it got
Mhm.
changed.
Yeah. Was there any other training activity in the last year?
February?
Did you visit
Didn't
other
we have-
commissions
We did
or?
have-
No, somebody came, who,
I don't know,
Help me
it
out
was
here.
before February, wasn't it?
maybe.
I wanna say I went to that.
No, we had somebody who came in and talked, because we were in the other,
It was Sharon
yes.
Ferraro
Yep,
from Kalamazoo.
yep, and gave us, we had some,
She- I don't remember when she came.
we'd have to go
I
back
have
through
the
old
emails on
meeting
my
minutes,
laptop.
yeah,
Okay.
but
So
Sharon
beginning
came
of the year
in.
sometime.
I
Mhm.
wanna say it might have been January of last.
Yeah, I just remember it was beginning of the year, it was after the holiday.
It had to have been January because,
You were still pregnant, right?
yeah.
Okay.
So I attended Congress for New Urbanism on a scholarship from CNU from a letter that Nancy DeBoer wrote for me as a commissioner.
Hmm.
So I don't know
Okay.
if that qualifies, but if you're trying to boost that list, that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. So the one in January, the two of you attended?
I was there. Sharon came, there were more
I
than,
think it
Mo-
was, I mean,
just
pretty
about
much
most of us.
annually we had training from Sharon.
I feel like just about everybody was there.
yeah,
I
it
was
was
there.
not just a
Yeah.
handful of us, it was pretty,
It was similar to what we're doing now, when the agendas
Mhm.
were slow, we would take over an agenda with
Okay,
extended training and there'd be sandwiches or
Okay.
pizza.
Yeah.
right.
okay.
If you need the
I think everybody
specifics.
was there.
I think
Oh,
so too.
What kind of
You can look it
sandwich?
up in.
I'm sure it's in the
City
meeting,
Deli.
yeah, it was
Oh,
City
City
Deli.
Deli.
Yeah, it's always
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think everybody that was a commissioner at that time was there.
Correct, I
Mhm.
feel that.
Yep. Because we
Me too.
worked to make sure that everybody's schedules would
Were-
coordinate that
Could
day.
have been,
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this sort of jumps to another piece that I've added further down, but there's a section of this that deals with what are your top goals for the next fiscal year. There's a bunch of things all coming together at the same time.
Mhm.
There's this annual report, there's the budgeting process with the city. Everybody's on a different calendar year, so reporting out numbers is really kind of a mess, but I guess what I'm looking for is mission goals. You know, what do you see for the next year as where you want to focus time and effort? I've said, just to take a whack at it, I've said update design guidelines, user-friendly review of work requirements, what we just talked about, make information about historic properties more accessible, energize our surveying efforts. I don't know how we're gonna do that, but, and then making decisions about the greenhouse. I don't know if anybody has other thoughts or ideas, things they wanna focus on. I think marketing, it's a little bit of,
I had sent you a
But
list of
marketing's
things
key,
that I
yeah.
thought were opportunities for
Yeah.
us in
Yeah.
conjunction
I
with
think
the
it would be
city.
useful if we had a package of information that went to the realtor
yeah,
who
Yeah, it's
lists
kind
a
of
house in.
marketing thing, yeah.
We had talked about that,
I
making sure
think, I
that
think we
realtors
can give it,
understood.
you know, I mean, a positive spin and say,
yeah,
you know, congratulations to whoever it is that buys this house, they'll be part of the historic district.
Yeah.
And include the report that says what that means economically.
okay.
You already mentioned it, Phil, but if you're looking to be strategic about the professional seat, I think succession planning, or, you know, just thinking about how the chemistry of the commission will change in the course of a year or two. I know there's a bunch of us, like, I said that I'm terming off, but I guess I thought after 2 years you had to leave. I think there's other people whose terms are up in this calendar year too, so it might just be something to think about.
Yeah.
How do you fill the table?
Right, because like
We
when
just said-
Adam left, we lost
I mean, Bethany, we lost a lot of people who had been on the commission for about 6 years, so they had a lot of
I think about Adam
history,
and
and then we lost our,
specifically.
yeah, we lost Adam.
Mm-hmm, yeah, at the same time.
So-
Right.
And just on that, Andrew finishes in June. Kim finishes her first term in June.
Mhm.
Mark's 2022. Jean-Pierre's 2022. Stephanie's June 20, first term. Nick's June
Yeah.
20,
I thought there were about
First
4
term.
of us.
John's
That's
June 22, first term.
Nah,
I
I can another
I
time.
think I finished a term for someone and then appointed.
You know, that,
Like,
so
where
this
did
is
we
kind of
go?
funky, because I was supposed to have finished a term and then started a new, I finished a term for, you know
I don't remember either.
So you're right, there are several people that have choices to make and
Mm-hmm.
may change, but.
Do we want to think about in the goals question, supporting these landscape plans? Offering support to Parks Department for intent for a landscape plan or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or improved collaboration.
Okay.
It's a lot of goals.
That's what I'm discovering. It's a lot of goals, and I'm discovering how limiting 15 hours a week is.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
I'm
sure.
sure you are.
Well, and there was also the, whatever we're gonna try to do with the National Register downtown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's my energized survey work.
Okay, all right, I
Is-
didn't know if that,
Yeah, that was intended as,
Okay.
as downtown, and at least downtown and the non-contributing buildings
gotcha.
within the
Yep.
district.
Mhm.
Okay. I've got your email right here on the marketing.
Oh.
I'm gonna skip that. I had marketing and communications on the agenda. I'm gonna skip that. Mallory was gonna be here, but she, at the last night, had a family issue she had to deal with. And she's been working on some of that. And she needs to be here to have that conversation. Jump down, update on the city greenhouse. City council nodded and authorized us to move forward. We are forming a committee, a working group, that will have several city staff, as well, myself, Andy Kenyon, Mark Vanderplug, someone else from Andy Kenyon's staff, park staff, one or two members from the Parks and Recreation Commission, and two, maybe three from Historic District Commission, if there's interested in it. This working committee is intended, as I've described it and shared with Andy, the initial task is we want to hold a workshop in February, 13th and 14th of February. Prior to that workshop, we'd be distributing materials to this working group so that they have a chance to review the history of the greenhouses and maybe some site information about alternative sites and that sort of thing, just to get them up to speed and kind of ready for a public meeting. Then on Thursday the 13th, we're talking about a tour of the greenhouses and then a visit to a number of possible sites, just so there's familiarity among the working group about those. And then have an open house in city council chambers and broad invitation for people to come in and talk about what they'd like to see with the greenhouses. You know, everything from, I expect everything from tear them down, don't worry about them, to move, to restore them where they are. And then the direction is trying to find an alternative location for some or all of the greenhouse. So that's kind of the scope of what the group will be looking at, and then spend as much of the next day as necessary as a working group, sitting around the table and generating ideas, looking at what uses may have been suggested. It's kind of got three prongs to it. One is, what's the location? Two is, what are the uses that would be able to sustain themselves in those locations? And then three, what's it all gonna cost? The cost piece, we won't have any answers to, and I'm not trying to get it at that session, but we'd like to at least know what those opportunities are. And if there is a preference coming out of all of that, at least begin to hone down what those options are. So get to a point on the 14th, Happy Valentine's Day, get to the point of deciding, what we want to take to City Council to say, here's the result of our public workshop, here's the input we got, and here's where we're refining some possible direction in that. Get council's input into that, and then the working group may come back together if there's additional work to do or refinement to that. Ultimately, it needs to swing into bringing some professionals into that process from there was a study done by somebody who's a greenhouse professional and estimated what it would cost to restore. That kind of expertise has to come into this, but not until we've decided sort of a general direction of all of this. So, Andy has his Parks and Rec Commission today, headed at 4 o'clock. He was gonna try to get a couple people to enlist. I'm looking for 2 or 3 people that might be interested in being part of this. I also didn't say, part of that committee is also, we want to bring in some design professionals into that conversation. I've had conversations with Nick, and there's some technicalities because of his role on the Historic District Commission that sort of change how we can engage Nick. I'm hopeful that Nick can be one of the 2 or 3 that come out of this commission, because I think his talents will be very valuable through this process.
By design, do you mean in architectural design? Do you mean, like, which D are you talking about?
I would say architectural design, land planning kind of design, trying to figure out where 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of the greenhouse might fit and what uses will be helpful, and the ability to help to illustrate that. I don't know if you all know Har-Yi Khan.
Very well.
She worked on the waterfront study, and is very talented. Having conversations with Har-Yi as well as being part of that, and possibly.
Well, I don't know her.
You don't?
What's she do?
She's got a design background. Nick, you probably know her better.
Well,
than
what
us.
kind of design background?
So she's got a very broad design background. She's got a doctorate from Harvard in design. She's an expert in housing, urban planning.
Does she have her own firm?
She's an urbanist. She has a sole proprietor firm in town. Yeah.
And we may have some additional help from GMB.
Any landscape, yes.
Yeah. So, looking for who's interested. Think you'll have the time to spend. It's a short duration at this point, but I don't know what it could spend into. So, Kim, you're interested?
I'm definitely interested. 13th and the 14th I can be available. I'm out of the country for like the next 10 days. After that, I leave the 15th. So if there's something the following week, I'm in India. So, but
Are you going with Boyd Wilson?
am I doing what?
Are you going with Boyd in India, or are you just, no?
No, I'm going, I've got a leadership development thing
okay.
through Hayworth that I'm doing in India.
Work.
Yeah. Not for fun. I wish it was.
Well, if you want to think about it, if there's anybody else that's interested. let me
Right
know.
now, you're just looking for a commitment on 13th and 14th, or like it's the whole.
That's where it's.
Or-
We
it's
could
the
still
whole day
change the date,
on
but
both
that's.
days, is that right?
It's probably, what we've said is maybe getting together at 2 or so on Thursday, the 13th. And then that would run into the evening, and then get together at 8 on Friday, and that would run till, as long as it needed to run, but 4 or 5 maybe at the at the most, at the latest. So let me know if you're interested in being a part of that, so,
I am.
thank you.
Who currently owns the greenhouse?
The city.
So Evergreen Commons does not own the greenhouse currently.
Not current. There's an agreement between the city and Evergreen that Evergreen will get the property at some point.
Yeah, that's that part of that, that's that gray area that I had questions about, so.
We were gonna trade, then they found out they were gonna take the building and maybe do some things to it and use those greenhouses for programming for some of their
Mhm.
folks, and they could grow flowers and beautiful, and then they found
Very
out it's a historic structure, and they can't just do whatever they want to, and it's gonna cost a fortune to fix them up. They said, well, wait a minute, we don't know if we want this building or not.
Mhm.
And put
So
it
the
all on
city still
hold.
owns
They
it.
put everything on hold, they're gonna get the property. I'm pretty sure that's kind of swapped out. We did some things with, there's a complicated agreement between running snow melt up Central Avenue all the way to Freedom Village.
Yeah, I knew it was,
And that had a piece of the property was in all of that, so that's about all this has been rolling for a couple of years now, so.
mhm,
But the greenhouse is the hitch.
mhm.
Just give you a very brief update on the buildings, the downtown buildings that were looked at for building addition and renovation, right in the center of the National Register Historic District. I think the message got through that I think we were trying to send. I think people that need to be aware are now aware that there's a National Register Historic District downtown. I would say the Planning Commission, particularly the chair of the Planning Commission, did not receive the communication very well. Another member of the Planning Commission was pretty supportive and raised the question, not just in a pre-session where it was introduced to them, but in the regular meeting, and asked the applicants some questions relative to historic issues. Planning Commission is aware there's a National Register District. Staff is now paying attention to it, and we are putting more on the website about the National Register District, trying to get people aware of it. And when a developer comes in and proposes something with a building within the district, the intent is that staff will get to them very early in their process, and a discussion about the National Register District will be a part of what they're advised to pay attention to as they come forward with proposals. We have no authority, if you will, to require them to do anything, but perhaps if they know about it early enough, they'll approach things a little differently than they might otherwise. So,
Did you have any sense that there might be some reworking of that design, or is that pretty much?
I have not heard a thing from the applicant. It was suggested to them, and Mark Vanderploeg was pretty supportive of urging them to contact us and, have a sit down at least with staff, if not with the commission, and explore that. Mark was saying there could be tax credits, and he was trying to advocate for it. But that was pretty well shot down by the chair of the Planning Commission. He didn't really support that. He basically said, you don't have to listen to this, that we have no control over that. And I'm saying all this with him ultimately watching me say this. So it's, there were feathers ruffled. I think some people felt they were thrown under the bus with this kind of coming at the last minute on all of that, and staff really not having paid any attention to the historic district there. So it's been an interesting few weeks, but I think the message has landed probably where it needs to. I don't know that it'll impact this project at all.
Yeah,
but
which,
One of the buildings is empty.
I'm sorry?
One of the buildings is empty. The
Right.
Storage moved out.
Right.
Yeah.
Seems like it's moving forward.
It's gonna look like all the fake stuff at the end down by the Civic Center.
Right.
They're gonna destroy the character of downtown. Systemic.
Well, incrementally.
Yeah.
It's a
one
question,
brick at a time.
whether we've raised the question soon enough.
Yeah, well,
No, I applaud you. I applaud the
Yeah.
fact that you raised the question. I think the powers that be need to decide if the character of Holland that makes it unique is something worth holding on to.
Right. 'cause
Because
there's
if
so
it's
many
gonna
people
look
that
like
come to
every
see
other
this.
area, if it's gonna look every, our downtown is authentically historic.
Mhm.
Yeah. Agreed.
You can't make fake history. You can, but you can tell.
Mhm.
The last thing I want to raise is something that Nick brought up to me, is the UDO that's coming together and the ordinances that are being developed now. And I hadn't been looking at them, but Nick reviewed something and noticed there's some provision and references to the historic district and excluding some things from the historic district that maybe there ought to be greater opportunity for. The broader question is, how does the Historic District Commission get a chance to weigh in on and see what's being developed as ordinance language? I had a quick conversation with Mark Vanderploeg. I'm sure he's willing to. Jenna's out on maternity leave for the next couple of months, but Mark, I think, is willing to come in and talk about the UDO and maybe focus on what those provisions are in the new language of the zoning ordinance that impact the historic district particularly. So we need to,
Is that a February topic, maybe?
yeah, it could be,
Just while things are slow.
yeah,
It's kind of the parks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
We
would
haven't
probably
seen-
be good timing,
yeah,
next
we-
meeting, if you think that's that important, and I agree with you.
Yeah, we haven't seen any applications, either leading up to this or, since the deadline passed. So things are really slow from that perspective, but it gives us a chance maybe to tackle guidelines as well as get at some of these other things and the CLG stuff as well. So that's all I have.
Did you wanna talk about, touring the?
Oh, well, I did.
Or, well, we can put it off to another, well, just, that was the last agenda item.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it's a virtual tour, whether we put some photographs together
Yeah.
and just walk through it. I don't know what you did back in the beginning of 2018, but you had a conversation about those non-contributing buildings. I just need to catch up with where you all are on that and make some decisions about where we proceed.
Could we go by bicycle, do you think?
Virtually by bicycle?
Well, I'm just worried that
Wrong time of the year.
we've been blessed
E-bike,
with decent
e-bike.
weather.
I know.
We've been lucky,
so
yeah.
Take
far,
it.
but, yeah.
Maybe virtual's okay, but I can see the value of kind of putting an eye on,
Context.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Can you
condition.
rent a
I think we'll
bus?
see condition.
The city
The
van.
Tulip Time trolley.
Yes.
Well, that's what they've done for, yeah, actually,
Open
that's
air.
what they've done for the Holland Area Arts Commission, for the commission, they've done that.
That's the Graph Nature Center van.
Yeah.
That's a better one.
That's what we use for Waterfront Holland to drive around and look at sites.
Oh.
Huh.
That's good.
We could do that at HBC.
Cool.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bill?
It's close.
You need a motion to
7:05.
adjourn?
Motion
Sure.
to adjourn.
Support?
All for, yes.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
Yeah.